So basically, watch this. I'm going to actually start clear at this level. I'm going to say vendor. I'm going to actually create my own little tubes and hoses vendor, okay? It does not exist. I searched for the name tube. I'm going to say create the new vendor. Tubes and hoses. And Ray, I don't know where you live, but we'll just pretend, okay? So basically, we have some information for tubes and hoses as a vendor. We say add the payee. As soon as we've added, we get a success message. I'm now going to say I'm going to create a PO, and I'm going to kind of create a generic part. And the reason I say generic is as soon as you start buying from multiple vendors, technically you want to call it a generic, okay? So instead of being a specific XYZ fittings, this particular adapter, it's just a general adapter that you're going to get from anywhere. What you need to think of is when you put it actually physically on your shelf, if it goes in any sort of bin, bucket, general shelf or anything, it's going to probably be a generic. If you had a specific spot for just this vendor and a specific spot for just this vendor and a specific spot, that's vendor specific. But if you're like, hey, I got 5 more of those adapters and you're going to kind of put them in a pile, generic, okay? Think generic. Okay, so basically we're going to do a basic live PO. We're going to put it in really quick, and I'm going to say, yes, I do have them. I'm going to add the items. Really quick, I'm going to do the general one. This is the generic. I'm going to say search the products. It should say I don't have that under tubes and hoses. I'll say I'm going to add it. No problem. I'll pop through here. I'm going to say, yes, I am going to monitor the quantity. I'm going to put it under, I don't think I have adapters. I'm just going to put it under basic for right now, okay? I'll just put it under basic. I was just looking at some of the options that I have. And then if that makes sense, okay? So now what we're going to do is, I think it was like 43 cents, and I'm just kind of guessing, and you wanted it at a 2.5 markup. So which basically kind of says, hey, eventually you're going to end up with about a 60% profit margin, and your price with the markup is going to be about $1.08 off of that 43 cents. Taxable each, coming down, no problem. Add the product. I'm going to make another one that's just for fun, and I don't know if these are the correct numbers, but let's just go like this. Let's see if I can search for this guy. Nope, I don't have a BJ one, so I'm going to click add it, and then I'm just going to pop through the exact same thing that we just did. And once again, you would be basically filling these things in later. We're going to say that this one is also at, say, about a 43 cents, 2.5 markup. As soon as I move out, it'll automatically adjust my fields, and I'll cruise down and add product. So at this point, Ray, this is kind of where yours is sitting at. You have some products out here, okay? And technically, they're assigned to your vendor. Now, in order to use these with different vendors, here's how you get to do the magic, okay? So let's just call these just general items. I'm going to bail out of this particular PO, and I'm going to totally go to somewhere new. So now time has passed, and I have a new vendor, and I basically want to assign that vendor to those generic part numbers so that I can get them into my inventory. We're going to say new PO, and we're going to search for a vendor. Now this is where you would not select, okay, when you're doing a thing called a special live PO, where it's mixed vendors, sometimes it's easiest if you actually do it to the generic vendor first, and then at the very end you flip it to the one that is the one you want to actually pay. Okay? So I'm going to actually do it that way. This is kind of the best practice. So right here I'm under vendor. I'm going to say, what do I have under hose? Tubes and hoses, create the PO. Now right here, this is kind of important. We've basically been doing this thing called a basic live. What I need to do is I actually need to go clear down to this level where I say special live, which actually allows me to do mixed vendors. And what's the final one that I'm going to end up paying? Who am I going to end up paying this to, Ray? I realize we just muted you, sorry. But I'm going to kind of fake it and kind of say, got some adapters. From whole steel, okay, just for fun, okay? And I'm going to end up taking that whole steel and we'll create a vendor for them. But right now it's currently under tubes and hoses, and this is just to kind of get the pieces in. I'm going to say, yep, I got them in my, I don't know what the amount is. If this was real, I would, but I don't know right now. Let's just say it's 10 bucks. I'm going to say add the PO. So at this point, it's already ready to select under tubes and hoses, and so I could basically do a quick little copy and say, yeah, go get that product. It's the generic one, okay? Yes, I want the generic one, and I want 50 of those guys. At the 43 cents, it's still the generic guy. Add it. Oh yeah, okay, so I'm ready for my next piece. So I knew the part numbers, and I'm kind of cheating because I don't know all of the part numbers. But I'll hit search. Say I wanted the BJ ones. There's the BJ0304. Yep, that's the one I wanted. Still the generic. Grab it. And I'm going to get 75 of those little guys. And I'm going to say add the line items. So Ray, at this point, I'm still on my PO. I'm in the edit mode. My PO number tells me which number it is. And I now have some items that have come in, and they're technically assigned to tubes and hoses. Pretty easy. I didn't have to switch anything. I just grabbed generics. At this point, I wanted to actually change and build this out to a company called Whole Still. But right now, tubes and hoses is the one that actually needs to, that's basically getting this piece, okay? So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to actually change this vendor on the main, and it will not change the vendor on the subs, so that they technically are going to be adding some pieces. I can see some looks, this is just a random comment, but I can see some looks from some of the people here in the class. They're like, I know where this is going. We're going to have to do this and this and this. So if we click on Edit Main, we do not have Whole Still in our vendor list right here, okay? In order for them to show up in this list, they basically have to have at least one item that plays. And so this is a piece that was requested of just earlier today by a different gentleman who wanted to kind of know how quickly they could get a different vendor in here. We have to kind of trick it. I'm not trying to make this complicated, but in order for me to change this vendor, I actually need to set up this other vendor. So right now what we have is we have a PO. We have one single PO right now. It currently is unhappy. It needs a little loving. It's currently set to tubes and hoses, but I want to set it to a vendor called Whole Still. So I'm going to see if I even have Whole Still in here. Vendor, Whole. Oh, I don't have it. So I'm going to quickly add the vendor. This is an important piece. Whole Still, and I'll just kind of fake a quick little address. Okay, as we pop down through here, we can add any other information we need. We'll add the payee. Okay, so technically I now have the vendor, successfully added the new vendor, and I have an ID number. However, Whole Still has no clue that it actually needs to show up in the PO section. So this is a piece that we were talking earlier on, a thing that we wanted to tweak and change, but right now, Whole Still exists, so I'm starting to get the pieces. However, Whole Still doesn't actually show up in my list yet because of a setting, and we're planning on changing that. This might sound like a little workaround, and the more I do it, it actually helps me to see that, yes, I do need to tweak this. Okay, so here's what I have to do. I have to trick the system. I'm going to leave for just a quick second, okay? I'm going to grab my marker and show you how I have to trick the system. I currently have tubes and hoses. I currently have Whole Still. I currently have a PO that's only attached to one of those guys, okay? This one has no POs. This is the Whole Still. He just exists here all by himself. and there's nothing in this piece that actually allows him to connect. So what I have to do is I have to trick the system, and I have to say, hold still. We have to create a quick little PO and create at least one item so that you'll show up in this list. And we are going to modify this, but until we get it modified, you're going to have to know how to do this, okay? So what we have to do is we have to trick the system for this whole steal because it does not have an associated piece of the puzzle. So we're going to actually just kind of switch back. I'm going to kill some of the drawings, and we're going to do a vendor search. So if I switch for Hull, he should be in there now. Boom, Hull steal. Here we go. The page that I was just barely on was on the edit mode. And there's availability to create a new PO right from there. This is where I was just a couple steps back. So if I create a PO, this is once again just a quick little trick. Boom, boom. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? We're just going to slam something in. Just going to call it setup and say, yep, they're in my system. And I'm just going to kind of quickly create a little item. I'm popping through this pretty fast, but basically I'm just creating a setup item as far as what's going on. I'm just going to say a basic, and I'm just going to pop down. It's going to be a 0, and I'm going to actually say, hey, you know what? You're actually, I don't care. I'm going to make you unlimited. Click, 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 all the way down. Click it. So at this point, all I did was I created a quick PO. I added one line item called setup, so that now Whole Still technically has a match through that. Okay, so it's kind of a roundabout way, and I can totally see what they were saying. We need to fix that. So good call. I'll take that to heart. Now what we have is I'm going to go back to the PO homepage. Here's our guy that's messed up. This is just a setup PO right here. This particular one for Whole Steel. This tubes and hoses one right here, if I click on edit right now that I've done that little flip-floppy around, I now am going to be able to see Whole Steel as the vendor, so I could change it so that I'm now going to be paying them even though I was using a general adapter from tubes and hoses, your generic inventory pieces. I have one more piece. I was going too fast. I see a little flag here that says check math. I probably should have done this while I was actually already on this page. Looks like I need to be at $53.70 some odd cents.
Maybe while you're on the page, just go over again the things you changed there.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So what happened is basically this vendor was set to tubes and hoses. Okay, it was set to tubes and hoses, and basically this is a real live PO. Now here's the piece that people kind of get confused on. A PO inside of Adilas, it might sound like, oh, that's a purchase order. A PO is an inventory tool. You're going to use it to update, you're going to use it to build, you're going to use it to bring in, you're going to use it to set up, you're going to use it to do all sorts of things. So if you get hung up on the name PO, you're like, but I didn't really do that. Don't get too stressed about that. It's just an inventory tool that happens on the incoming side, okay? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to get to Hull Steel, but because Hull didn't have an item, it wasn't being pulled into this list, and that's why we had to trick it really temporarily. Once it's been tricked once, it's good to go. It says, hey, I'm satisfied. I'll be part of that list. Whole Steel, we updated the amount so that it matched, and we said edit.
And that only changed it on the purchase order that I'm eventually going to pay for.
Correct. So this one right here, this Whole Steel, we have two generics. Like, it's the main vendor is currently Whole Steel. But look at this, I have two generic items that are listed into my things. This is the vendor, the generic vendor, and here's their items. Hopefully that makes sense, but basically at this point, Whole Steel, if I go to my payables homepage, there's a link directly for this one, but I'm going to actually go here. PO homepage, and then I'm going to click on payables. You can bounce around tons of ways. I wanted to show a bunch of other things. Whole Steel over here under POs has just this one. You can see that there's actually nothing under here for tubes and hoses right now, okay? Because I switched the main vendor to Whole Steel, even though underneath this one is just this PO. And if I wanted to go into its actual details, it doesn't have any Whole Steel items. It's using generics, okay? So that's called a special live PO. and that allows for mixed vendors. So Shannon, can you actually ask Ray through chat or whatever if that answers his questions? And we are going to be changing that process because I can totally see, I believe it was John actually that was saying,
That's too hard,
yeah, how come I have to keep tricking it? And while he's actually
Said mostly.
okay, ask him if he needs any additional information. Let's help him out there. I actually want to explain really quick what the history behind this is and why we did it that way versus as soon as you add a vendor, it automatically shows up on that list, which would be incredibly easy. That would be very, very easy.
He said no, so probably answering your question.
Okay. Really quick, what I wanted to do, and I was actually talking with my sister and Cheryl, my mom, over lunch, and we were actually talking like, how did that happen and what ended up happening? So in order to tell you why, basically, in order to change the main PO, I'm going to grab my marker again. So the problem we're having is we create the vendor and we're like, oh yeah, sweet. So you should automatically show up here, all these different places. What ends up happening is some vendors are only tied to expenses, outside services, different things that you're paying for, whatever's happening there. Your POs, this is only a portion of your vendors. So if I was able to cut this in half right here, only a portion of your vendors actually have products that make it into this portion. So instead of showing every vendor and their dog when I go to POs, it basically is saying, hey, go look to see if they have anything, and then just pull back those pieces. That's why we had to trick it. And where the history of this came from is the original company that actually started this, this company, Adilas, was actually a custom write-up for a trailer dealership. And so they had trailers and parts departments and all this type of stuff. And we had all sorts of extra vendors outside that were doing service on some of our units, whether it was trailers or used vehicles or whatever. So technically, we had thousands and thousands of vendors that were in the expense-only category, and we only had 200 or so that we were actually physically buying parts from. So instead of showing 2,500 vendors under here, we're basically like, let's limit that down so that we're just showing ones that are actually playing on the puzzle. And so that's kind of the history behind it. But I can see how that does kind of complicate things as far as if you're doing that often, especially under the generic products. What did he say?
Ray hasn't said anything back since no.
Okay,
He didn't
okay.
get additional information. But we do have some questions from Sandy that she also put in during the break.
Okay,
So,
great. So let me erase this and we will switch subjects then.
Okay.
You guys are doing great, and I greatly appreciate you actually chiming in. It really helps us kind of figure out what we need to do. And even this one right here, I'm showing you the workaround that we just did, but I guarantee you there will be some loving coming on that one. So we'll make it happen.
So Sandy gave us two scenarios.
Okay.
The first scenario, Knights come in and ask for a donation of wine for their fish fry. How would you handle donations and taking product out of inventory?
Oh, perfect. That's a wonderful question. And what I'm going to do really quick is I'm going to grab my handy-dandy marker out and just kind of show you the concept, and then we're going to do it, okay? So basically what you want to do is you have inventory. In order to take it out, you want to invoice it. But you will also want to say, how do I keep track of this so that I know what was actually donated? Because eventually I want this to be a write-off or whatever, okay? So what I would actually do is you go like this. Let's add one of these guys as well, okay? So the customer, most of what Sandy does, if she's selling wine, it's what we call a counter sale. No customers are assigned to the invoices. Bam, 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 bam. It's quick, quick, quick. However, if somebody comes in and I specifically want to track that person, to me what that says is we need a customer, okay? So what we're going to do is we're basically going to say we're going to create a customer called Knights, and then basically we're going to run the invoice just as if it's normal. We're going to change the price to 0000 so that basically they don't owe us anything for it, but it's still tracking cost of goods and it still depletes our inventory. Does that make sense how that would work? Okay, so I'm going to erase these little marks real quick, and we're going to go in and do that. So what we're going to do is, first off, I'm going to check to see if I have this particular customer in here. Do I have anything under KNI? I don't. I'm going to add it. Okay, I'm just going to call this a normal customer for right now. Okay, just for fun, I'm going to actually put the name donation on there, so it's like, oh yeah, that's the one I was trying to get to, okay? The only other pieces for a customer that are physically required are a zip code. Ideally, please don't leave it this blank. I'm just kind of showing you a quick little thing here. Normally you would fill in all the rest of the information, and there's tons of pieces, but technically you could skip everything else and just be like, whoop. Okay, so now we have a thing called Knight's donation. I would basically then say, hey, the first time I create them, I have to create them as a customer, okay? I could then start a new cart from them here, or I could do lots of different ways, okay? The first time, it's probably pretty easy to just go here and pull them in, okay? So just earlier today, we were helping John, and he wanted some wine brought in, so I'm going to actually go like this. What do I have under red wine? Okay, I actually currently have 50 of these things. So if I was Sandy, what I would do is I could technically just add as many as I wanted here. Say that we're going to donate 10 bottles of this. If I click add, it's going to physically bring in a price right here, okay? Now I have two choices. I can either bring it into the cart and then edit it from there, or I could edit it right here if I have a thing called advanced add to cart turned on, okay? Those who are in the class, which way would you like me to do it? Edit it before it goes to the cart, or they can hit the cart and then edit it?
Put the cart and then edit it.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
what I would say.
perfect, perfect. So piece of cake. So say you didn't even have this advanced add to cart piece turned on. We'd say 10, add, go. It pulls it in. It says, hey, guess what? You got customer information. We're tied to Knights. It comes down. It tells me some information about them. And it also comes down and says, hey, we currently have 10 bottles at $12.95. And so this is a total of this amount. Okay. Now, I can do one of two things. Okay. If I wanted it to walk out the door for zero price, I could do that. Or if I wanted to physically record that as a sale and then just internally solve it with an internal payment, I can do that too. So it kind of comes to a decision, if that makes sense. What I'm going to do right this minute is I'm going to say, I'm going to let 10 bottles go out the door, and all I'm worried about is inventory and cost. Okay, I don't really want to worry about internal payments or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to just scratch off the price. Beep. Scroll down, and basically I'm going to say, hey, you know what? This was, I'm not even going to tax this. It's going to end up being zero anyway, but I'm probably going to put it some sort of a, I'm going to put it under miscellaneous tax category at this point. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to recalculate all of that to zero. I'm going to click update. So now my cart is for $0. It's tied to a customer, and it physically will drag 10 of my red wine out of my inventory. Okay. So at this point, I can even come down here on the printable notes. This is a donation. This is a donation for the Knights of something. Okay, just for fun. Like basically, this is a printable note, so it will show up on their invoice. If I didn't want it to print, I would have to be in this little category above here. Okay. At this point, I'm going to say either checkout or update the cart. I'm going to say checkout. It's currently for 0. I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to mark this as internal, and I'm just going to say donation, create the invoice. So what this does is it currently created my invoice here. I'm just going to click on this little spot right here because it's a little easier to read. It's basically the same invoice. It's 111. Okay. Here's my 10 pieces that came out. There's technically cost associated with this, but it was 0 payments. Nobody owes me anything, and Knights now have some pieces. So here's what I'm able to do that's kind of cool. Later on, if I wanted to see how many things I actually gave away to Knights, I could do a couple different things. I could either physically go to Knights. So it's customer and Knight, and I can come in here, and I can basically go to the log. Once I'm at the log, I can actually say, hey, what all did they get? Or what are the invoices to date? Or what are the invoices last year? Or I could refine any of those pieces. Does that make sense? I could easily click on and say, what have we given you so far? Oh, it looks like we gave you 10. Like it's basically virtually starting to calculate what I'm giving them, even though I didn't charge a single price. It's basically saying, Hey, I've already given you $68. So say 2 months later, Knights Club comes in again and they're like, hey, we got a big, huge social. Can we get 20 bottles this time instead of 10? Okay. So we're going to walk through the whole process. I no longer have to enter the customer. It exists. Okay. So I can do a couple things. Start the cart. It's going to end up being a client or a customer invoice instead of a counter sale because I'm going to eventually tie that person to it. Start the cart. Right up here, I'm just going to see what I have under wine. And I currently have purple, red, and white. And purple, just so you know, this is a fictitious thing. We were just faking it. And so basically I have 40, 40, and 60 of these. And he wants a total of how many bottles did I say? 20?
20.
Okay, so why don't we do something like this? Why don't we do 5 of these, and we'll do 10 of these. Does that make sense? We'll say add it. It pops it into the cart. And now basically,
you have to hit add on each one, or do you hit the bottom when it went all in?
you can hit any one you want, okay? So basically,
it's marked, it brings them all in.
what happens is that's called the general part search, okay? And if you do, I'll just hit my back button. Actually, we'll do a new one just so that you can kind of see what happens. I basically up here said wine. Go get me wine. And I knew that that would basically get me some of these other pieces, okay? And I hit search. Now right here, if I add just a single quantity to one of them and I hit add, it doesn't really even matter which add button I do. Like,
Okay.
basically, I could even hit this one and it would pull 2 of these guys in there. What I happened to do is I was like, heck, here's all my pieces. Let's just add multiples, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't matter which add button you do in this particular, in the general inventory.
It's just going to add everything you've got there and throw it.
It will loop over it. So if I have even more, like I just did a search. Watch this. If I extend this out a little bit and I say, hey, why don't you go get me everything that I have underneath this particular vendor? Okay, this is funny. I was just playing with some knives and forks and whatever. Like I could technically come in here and put something here and something here and something here, hit add, whichever one I wanted to hit, and it would loop over. And what it does is it looks for a physical quantity.
Okay.
Anything that has a quantity would get added. So say I wanted 1 of this and 3 of these. But it's going to loop over everything. We'll clear them out, but basically that's what that does. Okay. So if I hit add, it basically just added a couple pieces in here.
Okay.
If I don't want them, I just go like this and say update the cart. Bam, they're gone. Okay. So we currently don't have Knights selected yet, and we currently have a full price. So we're going to be donating $319 retail value to this. And so if we wanted to, we could even record that in the notes or whatever, or we could run it out like we did prior. What I'm going to do is, first off, let's choose a customer. Takes me over to the customer homepage. I virtually popped into another little miniature world inside of Adilas. And I'm going to say, what do I have under KNI for Knights? Search it. Knights, the donation. Perfect. Assign that to the cart. All of a sudden, I have Knights donation. I'm still in my view cart page, and I now have 3 different items. And I currently am showing an extended price on this one. So in order for them to walk out the door, ideally, if I wanted to still set it at 0, like they owed me nothing, I would go like this. Edit, scratch it out, do 0. Okay, and then I would come down here and I'd say, hey, you know what? You're actually going to be miscellaneous because I don't want any sort of taxes on this. And what it does is it physically changes that quantity of 5 to 0, and it starts taking some pieces off of the puzzle. Okay, I'll just pop through here real quick, and we'll just scratch those out as well. There's other ways that you can change tax categories as well. If you don't want to do it underneath the edit, you can easily just change them right from here as well. And watch this. I can't change the price from here, but I'll just hit update cart, and it'll change that little tax category for me. But there's lots of different ways that you can do it. We'll just scratch this guy out as well. It's already down into miscellaneous. Update. So now at this point, it looks like a $0 invoice, but I'm physically going to be taking out of inventory 5, 5, and 10 of my different products. Okay, it's assigned to Knights. And then I can come down here. If I wanted to add more notes, I could add more notes. It's a piece of cake. It's my choice. And then I could actually say check out. $0. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You're going to be an internal payment, which basically says, hey, don't worry about it. It's basically, it doesn't really exist. It doesn't hit the who owes me. here's my little piece of the puzzle. So they walk out the door, but technically my inventory has been reduced and I tied it to the night's donation. So if I come up here, watch this. Say I happen to find, you can get to it from millions of different ways. I can go customer and type in nights, or I can come here, I'm on the invoice and it's already assigned to nights, and I can say, why don't you go right to this customer log? So here's night's donation. If I wanted to see all the invoice items, I could click here and it technically will tell me, okay, it looks like I'm 327 on this invoice. We did this. Here's my products, my quantities. I can actually say, okay, nights, we've now done $228 to you. That's cost, okay? That's actually not retail. If you wanted the physical retail value, like if you wanted to inflate it, you can do that as well. I'll do one more with a retail inflated value, okay? Just to change it up. Any questions so far?
With like an internal payment?
Yeah. So basically right here, the reason I set the price to 0 is I didn't want to have to track any sort of receivables and who owes me money and who does this kind of stuff. But you can technically do it the exact same way as far as, you know, here's how we're going to run it, okay? So we're going to start from here. They come in again and they want to start, okay? Now I can either start the cart or I can start searching for my items. It doesn't make a bit of difference how you go about this. So say I wanted to just pull up my wine pieces again and I wanted to do the exact same thing, 5, 5, and 10. And you'll notice that my quantities are now different. It was 40, 40, and 60, and now it's been decreased by that amount. I'm going to add it. It says, hey, what kind of invoice do you want to create? Yes, that's perfect. Boom. I'm already in the cart. It's currently saying $319. My total cost to this is completely different. If I click up here, I can actually, this is a special little link, view cart profit per line. I can actually say, what's my total cost? Okay, I'm basically sending $160 out the door, but virtually it's looking like this. I do not want all of this stuff taxed as well, because then I'm going to have to report that to the government. So I have a couple pieces yet to fix. So right here, I'm going to leave everything else just the way it is, and I'm going to actually just flip this to all miscellaneous. One thing that I think is kind of interesting, I have 3 items in here. As soon as I get a 4th one in here, I actually get a speed thing that will allow me to flip this in bulk. You want to see, just for fun, just to see the bulk flipping option? So if there's only 3 or less, I have to do it manually. But as soon as I go above that, watch this. Say, for instance, they wanted some hot tamales too. Here's my hot tamales, and say I'm going to add 2 of those into the thing. Boom. Okay, as soon as you get more than 3, you get a bulk flipper. Okay, so what this allows you to do is if you needed to change this tax category, I could go like this. Update the cart. Boom. All of a sudden, it's totally, I have 0 tax now assigned. Okay, but this little bulk flipper only shows up if you have 3 or more items in your cart. I should say more than 3 items. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to take the hot tamales off just because they just wanted the wine, alrighty? I don't have a customer. If I'm on a client invoice and I try to check out, I would actually get an error message right now. I'm going to show you the error message. It's not a big deal. It basically says, I need something here, okay? Check out, hey, I can't proceed. I need to assign a customer, okay? Okay, oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry, my bad. What do we have under donations? Oh, there it is. Assign to cart. You can see how it also found my name as well, okay? Because DON is what I search for, and DON. So it's very, very flexible as far as how that particular search works. So now that I have the customer assigned, my dates, salespersons, my amounts are totally correct, my total value is basically $299, and I say checkout. So basically at this point, instead of zeroing things out, I'm actually going to just basically say internal payment, and I'm going to say donation and create the invoice. So the only difference between this and the other one is this one physically shows a retail value, which may actually add value to your customer, because I can, wow, I got $299 worth versus 0,000. But total, what ends up happening is if you click view on this particular invoice and you go back to that customer log for nights and you click on all of their invoice items, you're still able to figure out the total cost. I've sent out the door $388.50. Okay, that's physically what walked out my door. Now only some of those had prices on them. That's why it's only saying $299, because look at all these ones that actually have 0000000. Okay, this is technically what we call the detail view. You can see how it kind of details the whole thing out. If you wanted to switch it to groups, it's literally as easy as going like this. What have I got? This one's kind of interesting. This report actually shows me which ones I actually even charge 0 at. Like it's kind of just a special little piece, kind of pulls in some of your other information. Why don't we see if that answers Sandy's question as far as how to handle a donation?
Okay. She did have a second scenario. She said yes. That's
Okay.
it. So we can go over a second scenario. Just a really quick question I had actually when we were looking at your receipt that you would have given to them. It showed the cost on there.
Oh,
You
it
can
won't,
hide that, right?
it won't show the cost. It'll show a price. Cost should be totally hidden. Did you want me to go back to that?
Yeah, well, that's why I was surprised. I was going to say, you really wouldn't want your customers
No,
to
no, no,
see
no, no.
that.
It wouldn't show it at all. So this is the one we're talking, the $299.
Yeah.
Okay.
Printable or something.
If we go to printable, basically it has a price, a quantity and a price, and then an extended, and then a total. Okay? There are ways if I wanted.
So I bet it was your price that I was looking at maybe.
Correct. And so you actually probably saw it on a miniature version right here.
Yeah, that's
Okay?
one.
So you're like, whoa! So what this is 5 at
That is
18 equals 94. Okay, so
Okay.
there's technically no cost on there. That's hidden. That is your business.
Okay,
We
that's
do
what I-
not we do not put that on the fee.